In the rolling hills of eastern Kentucky, where morning fog settles thick over tobacco fields and everyone knows their neighbor's business, a woman vanished on an October afternoon in 2003. Her name was Jennifer Lynn Thompson, 32 years old, mother of two, last seen alive at 3:47 in the afternoon according to the timestamp on a gas station security camera. She was purchasing milk and bread. She smiled at the clerk. She left in her green Ford Explorer, heading east on Route 460 toward the small town of Paintsville, where she lived with her husband and children in a modest ranch house at the end of Sycamore Drive. Jennifer Thompson never made it home. Her vehicle was found 3 days later, partially submerged in the muddy waters of Paint Creek, 23 miles in the opposite direction from where she should have been traveling. The groceries were still in the back seat, spoiling in the autumn heat. Her purse sat untouched on the passenger seat, wallet intact, credit cards present, $47 in cash still folded in the billfold. But Jennifer was gone, and for 19 years, no one could say with certainty what happened to her, until a confession came from the last person anyone expected. Paintsville, Kentucky sits in the heart of Appalachia, population just under 4,000 souls, the kind of place where Friday night football games draw the whole town and church on Sunday morning is less religion than requirement. The mountains rise steep on all sides, their slopes thick with oak and hickory, and the big sandy river cuts through the valley floor like a scar that never quite healed. In October of 2003, the leaves were turning, brilliant reds and golds against a sky that seemed impossibly blue. The air smelled of wood smoke and the sweet rot of apples falling from neglected orchards. Most folks worked the same jobs their fathers had worked, in the mines when there was work, or at the Dollar General or teaching school. Money was tight. Community was everything. And secrets, when they existed, were buried deep. Jennifer Lynn Thompson, born Jennifer Morrison in that very town 32 years earlier, had married David Thompson when she was 19. He was 21 then, broad-shouldered and handsome in the way of young men who work with their hands, employed at his uncle's auto repair shop on Main Street. They had their first child, a daughter named Emma, within a year of the wedding. Their son, Michael, came 2 years after that. Jennifer worked part-time at the elementary school cafeteria, serving tater tots and corn dogs to children who called her Miss Jenny. She wore her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail most days. She laughed easily. Those who knew her said she had a kindness about her, the sort of woman who remembered birthdays and brought casseroles when someone was sick. Her marriage to David appeared solid if unremarkable. They attended Paintsville Methodist Church most Sundays. They went to Emma's softball games together. They seemed, to the outside world, like hundreds of other young families trying to make a life in a place where opportunities were scarce, but roots ran deep. October 15, 2003, started like any Wednesday. Jennifer woke at 6:15, made coffee in the Mr. Coffee machine that sat on the kitchen counter, prepared lunches for Emma, who was 11, and Michael, who was 9. David left for work at 7 sharp, as he always did, driving his battered Chevy pickup the 8 blocks to the repair shop. Jennifer got the children on the school bus at 7:30. The morning was cool, temperature in the low 50s, and she wore a blue fleece jacket over her jeans and white t-shirt. Neighbors would later recall seeing her wave to the bus driver, a woman named Carol Hayes who had driven that route for 15 years. Everything was ordinary. Everything was routine. Jennifer's shift at the school cafeteria began at 10:30. She worked until 2 in the afternoon, then drove to the Paintsville Community Center where she volunteered twice a week, helping organize a food pantry for families struggling to make ends meet. She left the community center at 3:20. Several people saw her walk to her Explorer in the parking lot. She was alone. She seemed in good spirits. She told the center coordinator, a woman named Patricia Walsh, that she would see her on Friday. Patricia watched Jennifer pull out of the parking lot, heading south toward the Quick Mart gas station on Route 460. The security camera at the Quick Mart, a grainy black and white system installed after a robbery 2 years prior, captured Jennifer entering the store at precisely 3:47 p.m. The timestamp was verified multiple times in the months that followed. She walked directly to the dairy cooler, selected a gallon of 2% milk, then moved to the bread aisle where she chose a loaf of wheat bread. The clerk working that afternoon, a young man named Tyler Combs, would later testify that Jennifer seemed completely normal. She made small talk about the weather. She paid with a $20 bill. She accepted her change and her receipt. She smiled. Tyler Combs would replay that smile in his mind 10,000 times in the years that followed, searching for something he might have missed, some shadow of fear or premonition. There was nothing. She left the store at 3:51 p.m., carrying her plastic bag of groceries, and walked out of frame of the security camera forever. The drive from the Quick Mart to the Thompson house on Sycamore Drive was 4.2 miles. Under normal traffic conditions, it should have taken 7 minutes. Emma and Michael Thompson got off the school bus at 4:10 that afternoon. Their mother was not home. This was unusual but not immediately alarming. The children had keys. They let themselves in, dropped their backpacks in the hallway, turned on the television. By 4:30, Emma began to wonder. By 5 o'clock, she felt the first flutter of real worry. She called her father at the repair shop. David Thompson told her their mother was probably just running late, maybe stopped to talk to someone, nothing to be concerned about. He would be home by 6. David Thompson arrived home at 6:15. Jennifer was not there. He called her cell phone. It rang 4 times and went to voicemail. He called again. Same result. He called the community center. Patricia Walsh said Jennifer had left hours ago. He called Jennifer's mother, Helen Morrison, who lived 3 streets over. Helen had not heard from her daughter since the previous evening. Clear's throat, David Thompson would later say he felt annoyed at first, then confused, then something cold settling in his stomach that he could not name. By 7 o'clock, he called the Johnson County Sheriff's Department. Deputy Wayne Hurley took the call. Missing person reports in Paintsville were rare and usually resolved themselves within hours when the subject turned up at a friend's house or had simply lost track of time. But Deputy Hurley knew the Thompson family. He had gone to high school with David's older brother. He drove to the house on Sycamore Drive and took a statement. Jennifer Thompson, white female, 32 years old, 5 feet 4 inches tall, approximately 120 pounds, dark brown hair, brown eyes, last seen wearing blue fleece jacket, jeans, white t-shirt. Last known location, Quick Mart on Route 460. Vehicle, green 1998 Ford Explorer, Kentucky license plate 432 MNR. Deputy Hurley put out a BOLO alert. Be on the lookout. He told David Thompson to sit tight, keep his phone nearby. She would probably turn up soon. She did not turn up. By midnight, a search had been organized. Volunteers gathered at the Methodist Church, farmers and teachers and miners still in their work clothes, organizing into teams with flashlights and maps. They spread out across the county, checking roads and ditches, calling Jennifer's name into the darkness. The temperature had dropped into the 30s. Frost formed on windshields. Search dogs were brought in from the state police barracks in Prestonsburg. The dogs picked up a scent trail from the Quick Mart parking lot, but lost it after half a mile. Helicopters with thermal imaging cameras flew grid patterns over the county starting at first light on Thursday morning. Nothing. On Friday afternoon, October 17th, at approximately 2:30 p.m., A man named Russell Keaton was fishing on Paint Creek, about 8 miles south of town, when he saw something green in the water near the bank. He walked closer. It was the back end of a vehicle, partially submerged, nose down in the creek bed. Russell Keaton waded into the cold water and looked through the back window. He saw grocery bags. He ran back to his truck and called 911. The Ford Explorer was pulled from Paint Creek at 4:15 that afternoon. The driver's side door was closed but unlocked. The keys were still in the ignition, turned to the off position. The groceries Jennifer had purchased on Wednesday afternoon were spoiled but otherwise undisturbed. Her purse sat on the passenger seat. Everything was there. Everything except Jennifer. The creek bank showed no signs of a struggle. There were tire tracks in the soft mud, consistent with a vehicle driving slowly off the road and down the embankment. The tracks indicated the vehicle had been driven deliberately into the water, not careened out of control. Investigators examined every inch of the Explorer. There was no blood, no signs of violence. The odometer reading showed the vehicle had traveled exactly 27.4 miles since Jennifer's last oil change 3 weeks earlier. Deputies calculated backwards. From the Thompson house to the community center, 6 miles. From the community center to the Quick Mart, 1.8 miles. From the Quick Mart to the location where the Explorer was found, 23.1 miles in the wrong direction. That left approximately negative 3.5 miles unaccounted for in the timeline. The math did not work. Unless Jennifer had driven somewhere else first, somewhere between leaving the Quick Mart and ending up in Paint Creek. But why would she drive south when her home was north? Why would she drive her vehicle into a creek? And where was she now? Part 2. The investigation. The search for Jennifer Thompson intensified to a level Johnson County had never witnessed. The FBI sent agents from their Louisville field office. The Kentucky State Police dedicated 12 investigators. Volunteers numbered in the hundreds, combing through dense woods and abandoned mining sites, checking every culvert and hollow for miles in every direction. The local television stations sent reporters. By the weekend, the story had reached the Louisville and Lexington news. Posters with Jennifer's photograph appeared on every telephone pole and storefront window. The reward fund grew to $15,000. Those who knew the Thompson family struggled to make sense of it. Jennifer had no enemies. She had no secret life, no hidden debts, no romantic entanglements that anyone could discover. Her bank account showed regular deposits from her school cafeteria paychecks and modest withdrawals for groceries and household expenses. Her cell phone records revealed calls only to family members and a few close friends. There was no evidence of planning, no indication she intended to disappear. Her children needed her. Her mother needed her. Everything about Jennifer Thompson's life suggested a woman rooted in place, connected to community, with no reason to vanish. David Thompson became the face of the investigation, whether he wanted to be or not. He appeared at press conferences, standing beside Sheriff Marcus Dalton, pleading for information. Those who watched him on television saw a man hollowed out by fear and confusion. His voice cracked when he spoke about his children. His eyes were red-rimmed. He described Jennifer as his best friend, his partner, the center of their family. He begged whoever had taken her to let her come home. He offered to pay any ransom, meet any demand. Watching those press conferences now, knowing what would be revealed 19 years later, they take on a different quality. But at the time, most people saw only a desperate husband. Yet from the very beginning, there were those who quietly doubted. Deputies whispered in corners about things that did not quite fit. David Thompson's timeline for October 15th was airtight, verified by multiple witnesses. He had been at the repair shop from 7 in the morning until 6 in the evening. His boss confirmed it. His coworkers confirmed it. Security footage from the Dollar General next door showed his truck parked in its usual spot all day. There was no window during which he could have driven to Paint Creek and back unnoticed, and yet there was something about the way he stood at those press conferences, something about the precise nature of his grief that felt performed. One investigator, a state police detective named Rachel Winters, wrote in her notes, "Subject maintains eye contact, speaks in complete sentences, shows appropriate emotional affect, but there is a rehearsed quality, like he has practiced what to say." The investigation began pulling at threads. Neighbors were interviewed extensively. Most spoke of the Thompsons as a quiet, private couple, but a few mentioned hearing arguments through the walls of the modest ranch house on Sycamore Drive. Nothing violent, just the ordinary tensions of marriage and money troubles. One neighbor, an elderly woman named Dorothy Crane who lived 2 houses down, mentioned that she had seen David and Jennifer arguing in their driveway about 6 weeks before Jennifer disappeared. She could not hear what they were saying, but their body language was hostile. Jennifer had crossed her arms. David had raised his voice. Dorothy Crane had gone inside, not wanting to pry. Investigators also learned that David Thompson had taken out a life insurance policy on Jennifer approximately 8 months before her disappearance. The policy was for $200,000, a significant sum for a family with limited means. When questioned about it, David explained that his boss at the repair shop had recommended it, that they had 2 young children to think about, that it was the responsible thing to do. The explanation was reasonable, but the timing raised eyebrows. Forensic analysis of the Ford Explorer yielded frustratingly little. The vehicle had been in the creek for 3 days, which compromised much of the potential evidence. What investigators could determine was this: the vehicle had been driven into the water intentionally, at low speed, and whoever drove it had exited through the driver's side door before the vehicle became fully submerged. There were no fingerprints on the door handles or steering wheel beyond those expected to be there. No foreign DNA. No fibers or hair that could not be traced to Jennifer or her family members. It was as though the vehicle had been wiped clean before being abandoned, or as though whoever drove it into the creek had been exceedingly careful. Divers searched Paint Creek for a quarter mile in both directions from where the Explorer was found. They found nothing. Cadaver dogs searched the woods surrounding the creek. They alerted at 3 separate locations, but each time, excavation revealed nothing human, only the remains of deer and other wildlife. Weeks became months. The initial urgency faded. Leads dried up. The FBI agents returned to Louisville. The state police investigators moved on to other cases. By January of 2004, the search for Jennifer Thompson had become a cold case, relegated to a file box in the basement of the Johnson County Sheriff's Department. David Thompson, meanwhile, filed for a declaration of death in absentia. Under Kentucky law, a person missing for specific periods under specific circumstances can be legally declared deceased even without a body. The process took time, required court hearings, demanded evidence that Jennifer was not simply hiding somewhere of her own volition. By March of 2005, 18 months after her disappearance, Jennifer Lynn Thompson was legally declared dead. David Thompson received the life insurance payout. He told people he was putting it away for the children's education. Those who knew him said he seemed to be moving on as best he could, trying to rebuild a life for Emma and Michael in the shadow of incomprehensible loss. But there were cracks, small things, details that investigators filed away but could not quite make sense of. David had cleaned out the Explorer thoroughly 3 days before Jennifer disappeared, taking it to the self-service car wash and vacuuming every inch of the interior. When asked why, he said it had simply been dirty, needed cleaning, nothing more. On the afternoon of October 15th, after Jennifer failed to come home but before he called the sheriff's department, David had taken a shower and changed his clothes. This was mentioned almost casually in his initial statement. Deputy Hurley had noted it at the time but thought little of it. David worked in an auto shop. He came home dirty every day. Of course he showered, but in retrospect the timing was odd. Why shower before calling the police about your missing wife? And there was something else, something that did not emerge until months later when investigators were reviewing Jennifer's medical records. 3 years before she disappeared, Jennifer had been treated in the emergency room at Paul B. Hall Regional Medical Center for a broken wrist. The injury was consistent with a fall, which is what she told the attending physician. But the doctor had noted bruising on her upper arm that looked, in his professional opinion, like finger marks. Someone had grabbed her hard enough to leave bruises. The doctor had asked if she felt safe at home. Jennifer had smiled and said, of course, it was just a clumsy accident. The doctor documented his concerns but took no further action. By the time investigators found this record, Jennifer had been missing for 7 months. They questioned David about it. He said he remembered the fall Jennifer had tripped on the back steps. He had caught her arm trying to keep her from falling completely. That was all. Maybe he had grabbed too hard. He had not meant to hurt her. For those who have ever doubted someone you love, who have felt that sick twist in your stomach when a story does not quite align with the evidence before you, you understand what the investigators felt. They had a theory. They had suspicions, but they had no body, no witnesses, no physical evidence tying David Thompson to his wife's disappearance. And so the case sat, cold and silent, while David Thompson raised his children alone in the house at the end of Sycamore Drive. Part 3: The Silence. By the summer of 2006, nearly 3 years after Jennifer vanished, the Thompson family had settled into a new normal that was no kind of normal at all. Emma was 14, quiet and withdrawn, spending hours alone in her room writing in journals that she hid under her mattress. Michael was 12, angry in the way boys that age can be when the world has betrayed them, getting into fights at school, talking back to teachers. David worked long hours at the repair shop, coming home late most evenings, eating microwave dinners in front of the television while his children retreated to their separate corners of the house. The ranch house on Sycamore Drive, once filled with Jennifer's laughter and the smell of her cooking, felt hollow. Neighbors said you could sense it just driving past, a darkness that hung over the property like smoke. Helen Morrison, Jennifer's mother, had never believed David's version of events. From the first days after her daughter disappeared, something in David's demeanor struck her as wrong. Too controlled, too composed. She began keeping her own investigation, collecting newspaper clippings, recording the dates and times of David's public statements, looking for inconsistencies. She hired a private investigator with money she could not afford to spend. The investigator found nothing new. Helen's relationship with David deteriorated into open hostility. She filed for custody of Emma and Michael, claiming David was an unfit parent, though she stopped short of accusing him directly of involvement in Jennifer's disappearance. The custody battle was bitter and brief. David won. Helen was granted only limited visitation rights. She would spend the rest of her life believing her son-in-law had taken her daughter from her. But David Thompson was not the only one carrying secrets. In the spring of 2008, 5 years after Jennifer's disappearance, David began dating a woman named Carol Hensley, a divorced mother of 2 who worked as a receptionist at a medical clinic in Prestonsburg. The relationship developed slowly, carefully. Carol had known Jennifer slightly, had seen her at school functions and around town. Dating David felt strange at first, wrong somehow, like she was stepping into a ghost's shoes. But David was kind to her, attentive. He brought her flowers. He spoke about Jennifer with what seemed like genuine sadness, describing her as an angel taken too soon. Carol wanted to believe him. She needed to believe him. They married in November of 2009, a small ceremony at the courthouse with only immediate family present. Carol moved into the house on Sycamore Drive with her 2 children. The blended family was awkward and tense. Emma Thompson, by then 16, refused to call Carol anything but her first name. Michael, 14 and surly, skipped school and stayed out late with friends Carol did not approve of. The marriage, which had seemed like a fresh start, became another kind of prison. And there were the nightmares. Carol would wake in the middle of the night to find David sitting upright in bed, staring at the wall, sweating despite the cold. When she asked what was wrong, he would say nothing, just a bad dream, go back to sleep. But the nightmares came more frequently as the years passed. Sometimes David would cry out in his sleep unintelligible words that Carol could not quite make out. Once, she heard him say what sounded like "I'm sorry." When she asked him about it in the morning, he had no memory of speaking at all. Clear's throat. For those who have ever lived with someone carrying unbearable weight, you know how it changes the air in a house. How silence becomes its own language. How you learn to walk softly, to ask no questions, to ignore the things you notice because acknowledging them would mean facing truths you are not ready to face. Carol Hensley Thompson lived that way for years. She noticed when David would disappear for hours on Sunday afternoons, claiming he was going for a drive to clear his head. She noticed the way he avoided certain roads, certain parts of the county, as though they held memories too painful to approach. She noticed that he never spoke Jennifer's name unless forced to, and even then, his voice took on a strange flatness, as though he were reciting lines from a script. But it was Emma who finally broke the silence. Emma Thompson had grown into a young woman who trusted no one, who kept her pain locked inside so tightly she sometimes felt she might shatter from the pressure. She had moved out of the Sycamore Drive house the day she turned 18, getting a small apartment above the hardware store on Main Street and working nights at the Dairy Queen to pay her rent. She avoided her father. She had not spoken to him in months when, in January of 2013, she received a phone call from Michael. Their father and Carol were separating. The marriage had finally collapsed under the weight of all those unspoken things. David had moved into an apartment of his own. Carol had taken her children and gone back to Prestonsburg. And Michael, now 19 and working at the same repair shop where their father worked, said he needed to talk to Emma about something. Something about their mother. Something he remembered. They met at a diner on the edge of town, one of those places with red vinyl booths and fluorescent lights that make everyone look sickly. Michael ordered coffee. He did not drink and stared at his hands for a long time before speaking. Then he told Emma what he had been carrying for 9 years. He said that on the afternoon of October 15th, 2003, after he and Emma got home from school and their mother was not there, he had been more worried than he let on. He had walked through the house looking for some sign of where she might have gone, and in the garage he had noticed that their father's toolbox, usually kept in the back of his pickup truck, was sitting on the garage floor. The toolbox was wet like it had been washed out with a hose, and there was a smell, Michael said, a chemical smell, like bleach. Emma stared at her brother across the diner table. She asked why he had never mentioned this before. Michael said he had been 9 years old. He had not understood what it meant at the time. And later, when he was old enough to understand, he had been too afraid to speak. Afraid of what it might mean. Afraid of what people would think. Afraid, most of all, that if he accused their father, he would lose the only parent he had left. Emma Thompson called the Kentucky State Police the next day. Part 4, The Revelation. Detective Rachel Winters had retired from the state police in 2011, but she had never forgotten Jennifer Thompson. The case had haunted her. the way certain cases haunt investigators who sense they are close to truth but cannot quite grasp it. When the call came in January of 2013 that Emma Thompson wanted to speak about new information, Detective Winters came out of retirement as a consultant. She drove to Paintsville on a gray morning when sleet was falling and the roads were slick. She met Emma Thompson at the sheriff's department. Emma sat in an interview room with her hands folded on the table in front of her and told Detective Winters what her brother had said. The toolbox, the wet interior, the smell of bleach. She also told the detective about things she herself had noticed over the years, the way their father had discouraged them from asking questions about their mother, the way he had cleaned out all of Jennifer's belongings within months of her being declared legally dead, donating her clothes and jewelry to Goodwill, erasing her from the house as though she had never existed, the way he reacted if anyone mentioned her name, his face going blank, his body going rigid. Detective Winters contacted the Johnson County Sheriff's Department and requested the evidence file from the original investigation. She spent weeks reviewing every document, every photograph, every witness statement. She focused on the timeline. Jennifer left the Quick Mart at 3:51 p.m. Her vehicle was found in Paint Creek 23 miles away. If Jennifer herself had driven the Explorer into the creek, when would she have done it? Where had she been in the hours between leaving the gas station and the vehicle ending up in the water? And if Jennifer had not driven the vehicle, who had? Detective Winters brought in a forensic analyst to examine the original odometer calculations. The analyst confirmed what investigators had noted in 2003. The mileage did not account for the route from the Quick Mart to Paint Creek. There were extra miles. Someone had driven somewhere else first. Detective Winters obtained a warrant for David Thompson's cell phone records from October 15, 2003. Cell phone tracking was less sophisticated in those days, but tower data could still provide a rough location. The records showed that David Thompson's phone had pinged off towers near the repair shop all day, exactly as expected, until 4:32 p.m. At 4:32 p.m., David Thompson's phone pinged off a tower along Highway 40, approximately 12 miles south of Paintsville. 15 minutes later, at 4:47 p.m., his phone pinged off a tower even farther south, near the Paint Creek area. His phone remained in that general area until approximately 5:15 p.m., when it began moving back north, returning to the tower near the repair shop by 5:43 p.m. David Thompson had told investigators he was at work all day. His boss had confirmed it. His coworkers had confirmed it. But his cell phone told a different story. Clear as throat, Detective Winters requested the original witness statements from David's boss and coworkers. She read them carefully. David's boss, a man named Frank Sullivan, had said David was at work all day. But when pressed for specifics, Frank Sullivan admitted he had not actually seen David between approximately 4 p.m. and 6 p.m. The shop had been busy that afternoon. Frank had been focused on other things. He had assumed David was there, working in the back bays because David's truck was parked outside. David's coworkers gave similar statements. They had seen him in the morning and early afternoon. They assumed he was there all day. No one could actually confirm his presence between 4 and 6 p.m. In March of 2013, Detective Winters interviewed David Thompson's current boss, who mentioned in passing that David sometimes left work early without telling anyone, slipping out through the back door when Frank was not looking. It was not a big deal. David always made up the hours, but it happened. Detective Winters felt the pieces clicking into place. On April 3, 2013, Detective Winters and 2 Johnson County deputies arrived at David Thompson's apartment with a warrant for his arrest. David opened the door in sweatpants and a t-shirt, looking older than his 43 years. His hair had gone gray. His face was lined. When Detective Winters told him he was being arrested for the alleged involvement in the disappearance of Jennifer Lynn Thompson, David Thompson did not react. He simply nodded. He asked if he could put on shoes. They let him. He walked to the patrol car without resistance. He climbed into the back seat, and as they drove to the county jail, David Thompson began to cry, silent tears running down his face. No sound, just tears. The arrest made national news. Cable crime shows sent producers to Paintsville. Newspaper reporters descended on the small town. The community, which had largely moved on from Jennifer's disappearance, was thrown back into the nightmare. Some people believed David was guilty. Some believed he was being railroaded. Opinions split along lines of friendship and family loyalty. The case had waited 19 years to be solved. Now it would wait longer still as prosecutors built their case. David Thompson was held without bond. His attorney, a public defender named Martin Cross, argued that the evidence was entirely circumstantial. Cell phone tower pings proved nothing. The lack of alibi witnesses proved nothing. The fact that David had cleaned a toolbox days before his wife disappeared proved nothing. But prosecutors had something more. They had begun quietly interviewing people who had known the Thompsons in 2003, people who had been reluctant to speak back then but were willing now. A woman who had worked with Jennifer at the school cafeteria came forward. She said Jennifer had confided in her about 6 months before she disappeared. Jennifer said she was afraid. She did not elaborate. She did not name David specifically, but she said if anything ever happened to her, people should ask questions. Another witness, a mechanic who had worked at the repair shop with David, told investigators that on the evening of October 15, 2003, David had asked him if he knew how to hotwire a vehicle to make it look like an accident. David had phrased it as a hypothetical question, just curious, but the mechanic remembered thinking it was odd. He had not thought much of it at the time. Now, in light of Jennifer's disappearance, it took on sinister meaning. The case went to trial in September of 2014. The prosecution laid out a theory that David Thompson, motivated by marital problems and the life insurance policy, had taken Jennifer's life on the afternoon of October 15, 2003. They argued that David had left work without being noticed, driven to an unknown location where he had arranged to meet Jennifer, taken her life there, disposed of her body in a location that has never been found, then driven her vehicle to Paint Creek to stage it as an unexplained disappearance. They presented the cell phone records. They presented the witness testimony about Jennifer's fear. They presented the mechanic's statement about the hot wiring question. They presented Michael Thompson's memory of the wet, bleach-smelling toolbox. The defense argued that none of this constituted proof. There was no body, no physical evidence, no eyewitness. The cell phone records could be explained by David taking a late lunch break, driving around to clear his head. The toolbox could have been cleaned for any reason. The mechanic's testimony about the hypothetical question was meaningless. Jennifer's statement about being afraid could have referred to anything. The defense painted David Thompson as a grieving husband who had done his best to raise 2 children alone after an unimaginable tragedy, now being persecuted because the police needed someone to blame. The jury deliberated for 4 days. On September 26, 2014, they returned a verdict, guilty of manslaughter in the case of Jennifer Lynn Thompson. The courtroom erupted. Emma Thompson sobbed openly. Michael sat stone-faced. Helen Morrison, now 71 years old and frail, collapsed in her seat and had to be helped from the room. David Thompson showed no reaction. He stared straight ahead, empty. David Thompson was sentenced to 20 years in prison. At the sentencing hearing, the judge addressed him directly. The judge said that whatever David had done to Jennifer, wherever her remains might be, he had robbed her children of their mother and her mother of her daughter. The judge said David had lived free for 19 years while Jennifer's family lived in agony. The judge said the sentence was inadequate, but it was all the law allowed given the limitations of the case. David Thompson was asked if he had anything to say. He stood. He looked at Emma and Michael sitting in the gallery. He said, "I am sorry for what you have been through. I am sorry for all of it." He did not admit to taking Jennifer's life. He did not confess to any specific act, but those words, delivered in a voice thick with something that might have been remorse, were the closest thing to an acknowledgement anyone would ever get. Jennifer Lynn Thompson's body has never been found. Searches have continued sporadically over the years, focusing on old mining sites and deep woods in Johnson County. Volunteers still go out sometimes on the anniversary of her disappearance, walking the hills and hollows, hopping to bring her home. Emma Thompson, now in her 30s, has left Kentucky and rarely speaks publicly about her mother. Michael still lives in Paintsville, working construction, trying to build a life in the shadow of his family's tragedy. Helen Morrison passed away in 2018. She is buried next to an empty plot reserved for Jennifer, waiting for the day her daughter's remains might finally be laid to rest beside her. Closing. The case of Jennifer Lynn Thompson reminds us that justice, when it comes at all, often comes incomplete. A conviction without a body, a family without closure, a woman who walked into a gas station on an October afternoon and simply ceased to exist in the eyes of the world, leaving behind only questions and grief and a community that will never quite heal. Her children grew up without her. Her mother died waiting for her. And somewhere in the hills of eastern Kentucky, Jennifer rests in an unmarked place, known only to the person who put her there. If this story mattered to you, subscribe and hit the bell. Share the episode. Someone somewhere may still be waiting to be heard.